All right, everybody, we are here today with Felix Maradiaga. We're here at the Bitcoin Policy Summit. Felix is the Democratic opposition leader in Nicaragua. Nicaragua is currently under the leadership, I don't know if we can call it that, but under the rule of Daniel Ortega, who is an autocrat. And you do really important work in bringing this to light. So could you tell us a little bit about what you do, please, Felix?
Well, thank you, first of all, for the invitation. Nicaragua is going through a very hard time. According to the Freedom of the World report, we have the very unfortunate label of being the country that over the last 10 years has lost the most freedoms in such index. So that in itself is really outrageous. But what does that mean beyond just an index? Just imagine a country in which you could go to prison for raising the national flag, in which you could go to prison for tweeting, for receiving a remittance from an international donor, or for expressing your opinions in social media. So that's the situation in Nicaragua. And that has led not only to a very high number of people in arbitrary detention. Right now, there are 130 people in prison in Nicaragua for political reasons. But over the last 3 years, we've seen over 1,700 Nicaraguans being imprisoned under very inhumane conditions. I was, one of them. And close to 12% of the population forced into exile. So what I'm trying to do is to reestablish the capacity of the democratic opposition alongside a large network of freedom fighters to continue to do our work, in this case, from abroad.
Okay, thank you. So you talked a little bit about making contributions, how you can get in trouble for something like that. Obviously, using the traditional financial rails, it's much easier to track contributions or to even cut them off. So how does Bitcoin play a role in some of the work that you do or some of the work that people like you do in Nicaragua?
That's very interesting. I need to credit my wife, Berta Valle, for being the first that actually understood the capacity of this technology to continue to support freedom fighters, not only in Nicaragua, because now we're working with bigger projects thanks to the vision of HRF through our common friend Alex Gladstein, who has been at the forefront of this vision of how Bitcoin can be a technology to support freedom fighters who are at the front lines doing human rights work or doing pro-democracy work. And I'd like to illustrate this by explaining the concrete situation of Nicaragua. Back in 2018, I gathered a team of human rights defenders to actually write reports on the situation of Nicaragua. And of course, when you write these reports, when you do research, you have to hire camera people, you have to hire translators, you have to buy plane tickets. Actually, the regime was able to access all the databases of these payments, which came from organizations such as the European Union, the United Nations, United States Agency for International Development. And based on those databases, not only from my organization, but for other 9 organizations, these 9 human rights defender groups became the target of political persecution. So we learned very early that we couldn't use the traditional banking system because financial repression for political control is actually one of the areas in which dictators have learned a lot. They become highly sophisticated. And that's one of my points on my talk today, that dictators, or what I call dictators 2.0, are using technologies for repression. They're using face recognition. They're using surveillance methods. So as human rights defenders, we need to use technology to advance freedom. We are not Bitcoin enthusiasts from a for-profit perspective or from an investment perspective. We're actually agnostic when it comes to technology. But when trying to look for technologies that can help us send resources to human rights defenders who put their life at the front in order to advance these causes, we learned that Bitcoin is the only tool that it's bulletproof to this financial repression from dictators.
Interesting. And so you spoke today, we're here at the Bitcoin Policy Summit. We have a lot of people from around the world here, like yourself, who do work with freedom fighters around the world, pro-democracy activists, human rights activists. What do you hope when it comes to legislation and it comes to regulation that comes from the United States, what do you hope to see? And what does the type of legislation or regulation that we produce here, what sort of effect do you think that that will have on the world and people who use Bitcoin around the world?
Oh, that's a great question. And I'll go beyond only the US. I recently spoke in London through an invitation of the Magnitsky Justice Campaign. as you know, the Magnitsky sanctions are becoming a global movement to basically use sanctions against these regimes. But the thing is that these regimes are also sanctioning freedom fighters by shutting their bank accounts. But the outrageous thing is that they're using the rules, for example, established by the IMF. So one of the examples that I use today is how a regime like Ortega can be praised by the IMF by the number of bank accounts that they shut down using the international money laundering mechanisms. So, of course, my advice goes well beyond that, but very specifically, we need to start by recognizing a very simple and clear reality. Is that the mechanisms developed after the Second World War are no longer effective. We need to use technology. We need to understand this technology. So the traditional banking system and the traditional laws of anti-money laundering are actually backfiring for many human rights defenders around the world. In the Nicaraguan case, which I think is an outlier for such a small country, we see 3,400 NGOs shut down using these particular laws. Yes. So I think that policymakers around the world who are suspicious of Bitcoin, they must acknowledge the fact that it's completely understandable to have questions when we don't understand a technology. Yep. Once you are educated about the technology, you can really see that this is a tool that I think is way more viable to tackle these challenges than traditional monetary policies.
Yeah, it's perfect. Anything else you'd like to tell the world about what's going on in Nicaragua, how they can support your efforts, how they can support the efforts of other people like you doing the type of work that you do?
Well, I'll emphasize that Nicaragua, it's a case study of a bigger problem. Ortega is not a problem only for Nicaraguans. He's becoming a problem for regional stability. Dictators are collaborating among themselves. They are sharing technology. They are sharing financial mechanisms. They are supporting themselves through weapons and mechanisms of repression. So those of us who believe in freedom, in human dignity, in human rights, and in free and fair societies, we need to collaborate among each other. And the best way to collaborate is to get educated, to understand what is happening around the world. We have been collaborating with a fantastic platform, which is the World Liberty Congress. So through worldlibertycongress.com, you can learn more about our work.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you so much for your time, Felix. Much appreciated. Thank you.